Welcome to the Chicago Council on Science and Technology's Landscape of Techpark Innovation conversation here at 1871. I'm Erin Dragato, the Executive Director at C2ST, as we like to call ourselves. I'm proud to say that tonight's event marks the start of C2ST's 6th season and 83rd program. This is a big deal. I know it's not like 100 or anything, but it's still a big deal. So thank you for those of you who have been with us forever and those who are new to our organization. We definitely view ourselves as an incubator of sorts, and we bring together universities, national laboratories, museums, and also industry in an effort to increase the public's understanding and engagement of science and technology and issues and research and development pertaining to the importance of why it is that Chicagoland is dynamic in this space and what we have to offer. We could not have made it this far without the help of our wonderful partners, so I cannot go without saying 1871 for partnering on this space, our sponsors and members like yourselves who continue to build and share this knowledge of science and technology in the hopes to change the landscape for generations to come. We encourage those of you who have not yet done so to become members to help increase these conversations and continue them. So you can check that out at c2st.org, or there's information as you leave tonight. So to start off tonight, we felt tonight's discussion was important to bring together the private and university incubators for the first time to discuss major overarching themes, from concept to market, sort of how do they work, what do they do, and who do they commingle with, what we might expect to see produced in the near future, and why Chicago is ripe for this kind of industry and innovation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator and panel to the stage. Well, sorry, you guys are already here. Jim O'Connor, Jr. He's managing director at MVC Capital and co-chairman board of directors for Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center. Jim is also the interim CEO for 1871. Go ahead, Jim. Wait, you can raise your hand if you want.
Okay. You're doing great.
Okay. David Baker, Vice President for External Affairs at Illinois Institute of Technology. David is the Executive Director of IIT's University Techpark.
Experience section.
You've got a following. Wow. Home to life sciences, clean tech, and IT startups. Stephen Collins is Senior VP at the Pritzker Group. Stephen was the instigator of 1871, this very space you're sitting in today, which is a co-working digital space run by the Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center. And in its first year, 225 tech startups housed at 1871 created over 800 jobs, and he'll talk a little bit more about that, I expect. Kapila Vigis, Director of Enterprise Works Chicago. Enterprise Works Chicago is located on UIC's campus in the Illinois Medical District, and it will work to build on the success of Enterprise Works, the tech incubator on University of Illinois' Urbana campus, which supports startup companies. And finally, John Flavin, Executive Director of Chicago Innovation Mentors, which provides mentors for science-based ventures through the use of mentor teams. And to date, CIM has 175 mentors and have worked with 84 ventures. So Jim will start us off in a roundtable discussion, and then we'll open it up to Q&A, so get your questions ready as we go along. So enjoy the program, and Jim, I leave it in your capable hands.
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause to our kind hosts here tonight. Thank you all, first of all, for being here tonight. We love to do these types of events at 1871. The whole idea here, and Stephen can talk about it during his panel discussion, was to have a place like this in the city, easy to get to from the trains or walking from the loop, where we could have these open discussions on just things like this, innovation in the city, what's changing, what's going on, how do we collaborate. Having the physical place really made a difference, because Starbucks Corner or Potbelly's corner office wasn't working for this type of setup. So it's really fortunate that we're able to have everyone here. We hope we have a great discussion tonight. We're going to keep this really loose and free flow across the panel here to try to give you a good sense of what's really happening in Chicago. across a number of different areas, from technology to collaboration to how different groups are working together. What are some of the pitfalls of historical problems that have occurred in this area, things that we can learn from, how do other cities do it versus us. And you've got a great panel here that was introduced previous to my discussion that cover a wide range here. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of start it off by some questions and then obviously get them from you guys so you can hear and learn from the people that have really been behind making all this happen. So I'm going to start to my right with Stephen here with the first question, just to kind of give us a better sense of where we're at today and how this thing all happened, this building, 1871, the center itself. And David, we talked about this last night because these things don't just fall out of the sky. They often take years to occur. So tell a little bit about the history and then we'll get into some more specifics.
Sure, thanks. So, this place was you can think about it as a symptom of what was going on in Chicago for the last decade, last 12 years, really, with a lot of institutions, a lot of people represented here, and a lot of other folks who'd really built a thriving tech community in Chicago. And one of the things that was sort of missing in Chicago a few years ago that other cities had developed was a concentration, either a neighborhood or a particular place where entrepreneurs could come together and get access to mentoring, get access to potential funders, potential partners, potential sort of like-minded peers who are going through the journey of building a company together. And it just wasn't obvious. As Jim said, it was Potbellies and it was Starbucks and it was somebody's basement and it was whatever miscellaneous sublease space people could find on a short-term basis in whatever corner of the city or the suburbs. And, as you all know, Chicago is a big city with a big thriving economy, and so entrepreneurs as a percentage of the population are quite small. It's not like Palo Alto where you bump into people on every street corner who are going through something similar to what you're going through. So the idea was take the existing pieces of the digital startup community, which means the universities, which means the mentors, which means the investors, which means the top-tier accelerator programs that existed in the city, and put them all under one roof, create space for early-stage entrepreneurs to come and make it their office and make it their home in some cases, on a per-person, very flexible, per-month basis. So it's very easy for companies to move in and then find the connections and the resources and the community that they really need to accelerate the growth of their businesses. So, as maybe Aaron said in the beginning, there's 225 companies in here after a year. Keep in mind these are small startups. This place is specifically targeted towards very early stage web, mobile, internet, software companies. So the average is 1 to 6 people, skewing towards the earlier end. And the idea is they come in, they get the help that they need, they help sort of figure out their business, and then they get out as fast as they can because they raise money, because they hire people, and because they go find their own office. So it's been open for a year and a half about, and so far so good.
Yeah, and it's a great manifestation of history. So David, what I'm trying to do is really lay the groundwork of what happened, and then what's happening today and where we're going in the future. So I want to ask you, because we talked about this last night, you've been in this scene now for a number of years, and we were referencing 70s, 80s.
80s, yeah, early 80s.
Tell the crowd a little bit about how we got here today from your perspective, because there are so many different players who were part of this whole scene, and kind of how it all evolved from your perspective, because universities like IIT have been right in the center of this activity.
Yeah. And you wrote a fan club.
Well, yeah, I know. It really started in the early 80s when I came to town. The coincidence was that a group called the Chicago Soft Technology Association, or Software Technology, set up its offices on the same floor as the Illinois State Chamber of Commerce, where I was the executive vice president. And so I walked into their office and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And I said, "Well, we're trying to pull together the software community and the tech community of Chicago." I said, "Well, what's that? Who are they?" And at that time, it was pretty small, but it took, that group became the Chicago Software Association. At the same time, KPMG took on the goal of showcasing the early stage tech companies by their annual dinner and award ceremony that got the community all together, as such as we were. They could afford to pop for dinner for all of us at the Ritz-Carlton. But the other thing that happened, which was a very important moment, was when the Civic Committee of the Commercial Club ran a big study in 1984 to try to envisage the future economy of Chicago. And in it, they postulated the idea of a co-working space, of building a facility where all the software startups could come. And then what they said was, we want the big companies to pay for it. That's the story I told you last night, because you were at Motorola, and Motorola was going to be the big company to pay for it. And all the big companies said, well, why do we pay for them? Because they're just looks like potential competition. Right. So that idea did not go forward, and so it took us another 15 years to really start it. And the actual idea for this kind of support mechanism came out of the Mayor's Council of Technology Advisors that I served on in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they came up with an idea for a single entity that would support technology company startups, where you would get the kind of support, the mentoring, the connection to big companies. And David Weinstein started up the Chicagoland Entrepreneurial Center that was supported by the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. And the really key thing was that that board was made up of the real tech entrepreneurs that had grown up in the city independently without any support, but had succeeded. You're one of them. I mean, and that board, I had the honor of I still serve on the board. They had like a couple of universities, but it was mainly tech entrepreneurs who at the age of 35 or 40 were ready to give back. And I think that that really was the genesis of this, because if you look at who made it, who's on the board, who supports 1871, it's those guys that raised their hand, and ladies that raised their hands in the middle 2000s and said, we need to create a sustainable tech community. But so that's for the digital economy, right? And Kapila and I and John work on trying to build the same kind of an ecosystem for the life sciences community. And we got a couple of people here from iBio who are very involved, and we started really seriously on that in 2001. Although actually Kapila is going to talk a little bit about her incubator, which has been around since the mid-'80s, the first step in the process of trying to build a similar ecosystem for life sciences, which is a lot more complicated. We'll talk about that later.
Exactly. Thank you, David. And for the history on it, it's important. And I think, Kapila, I wanted to go next to you on it. To me, across all these verticals, from digital to bio to food to ag sciences, is the notion of the university as a foundational element here. And I wanted to see if you could talk about it. Obviously, David as well has perspectives here. But what does the university mean, particularly in the state of Illinois, with all these assets for these types of initiatives from your perspective?
Sure. So I think, first of all, what we realize is that the university system has not only at least the University of Illinois system has not only a mission to educate and conduct research, but we also have an economic development mission. And so a lot of what we want to do is to figure out how we can leverage our vast assets across the university system to contribute to the economic benefit of the community as well. And so that's sort of where a lot of this notion, a lot of these notions of commercializing the technology and the research that comes out of universities and having incubators based at universities has started to evolve over the last couple decades to be able to support that. And so I think it's been a really interesting evolution over the last couple decades that you see. We have everything from the talent to the technology and the mechanisms to push them out. And I think we feel very strongly that we are a big part of nurturing the next generation of entrepreneurs who are trying to develop these complex R&D initiatives. One of the big differences that we see at the university is with the complex R&D initiatives, technologies, there's a much longer life cycle for developing them. And so a whole host of assets, resources, and support need to come around those entrepreneurs to be able to get them to the next level. And sort of the depth and breadth of the assets the university has provides that nurturing environment.
No, that's great. And I'm just curious, in the audience here, how many people here have an association with an Illinois university of some sort? Right, pretty much everyone, right? Northwestern, DePaul, Loyola, Illinois, IIT.
NIU.
NIU, yeah. You can go on and on. It's an incredible asset we have here. In fact, I told David, yesterday I'd heard this stat the other day that of the top film schools, 2 of them in the U.S. are in Chicago, Columbia and DePaul. I mean, how many people know that? That's a really impressive statistic when you think about, hey, that could be a whole other vertical for activity. It's not Hollywood, it's Chicago. So, again, assets that are great here. So, John, I want to turn to you and ask a little bit more about what you do in terms of how you see the alchemy of all this evolving from your perspective over the last few years. You know, mentorship and the bio initiative and things such as that. Your perspectives on this whole area and what you think we're going to right now.
Well, I think I'll start with Chicago Innovation Mentors because I think it's representative of a lot of things coming together. In this case, SIM for short represents a consortium of University of Chicago, Northwestern University, the University of Illinois, both here in Chicago and in Urbana, Argonne National Laboratories, Northern Illinois University, Rehab Institute of Chicago, and then iBioPropel. And that group came together to form this consortium a couple of years ago around the idea of trying to help our faculty and early stage entrepreneurs in the hard sciences by providing team-based mentoring. It's modeled on the MIT Venture Mentoring Services model that's been highly successful over the past several years, but tailored to a multi-institution initiative in complex R&D. And as Kapila pointed out, complex R&D, you know, in biosciences, clean energy, diagnostics devices, whatever the case might be, there's a much longer time horizon to the market, higher failure rate, more regulatory hurdles to get past the FDA, if you will, intense need for capital, and so there's a tremendous amount of patience required in fits and starts for these types of ventures. So the idea behind SIM was our universities, in my opinion, collaborating at the tech transfer level for the first time, recognizing that they could harness this well-heeled mentoring ecosystem that we had here in Chicago of people that wanted to give back of their time, that are highly talented people that have developed drugs for AbbVie, for Abbott, for Baxter, diagnostics devices. So we're very fortunate that we have some of the world-leading pharmaceutical and healthcare companies in the world right here in our backyard. We have people with talents that want to give back of their time. They've done it before. They know how to bring one of these hard technologies to the marketplace. I've watched it develop over time, and I think what I was struck by with SIM as an entrepreneur, having been at it for quite a while, our first company started in the Chicago Technology Park, the first incubator of its kind, Medichem Life Sciences. And we built that company to 300 employees over 10 years, did an IPO, and then spun off another company, did an IPO with that company. But I attribute a lot of our success to starting at the Chicago Technology Park. So I'm a big believer in aggregating people and resources together. And I'm also a big believer in Chicago in the fact that from where we were back then to where we are today, we've come light years to where we sit. And so SIM, to me, represents, on a personal level, a coming together of a lot of these attributes that are setting the stage for the next 10 to 20 years. Because in building this ecosystem, as Kapila and David have pointed out, it takes longer to get these companies and products to the marketplace to see the big bangs, but they're critical. I mean, if you think about America's success in the future, these are companies developing technologies that, you know, are medicines or devices, or, you know, game changers in energy and what's going on in battery technologies, et cetera. So that's kind of what I've seen in terms of my own personal path and journey to where we are right now. But watching the universities come together, collaborating, and then mentoring, and then starting companies because of this voracious appetite of faculty and students that want to start a business. And I think that's a changing culture that we're experiencing here in Chicago that's exciting to watch.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Real quick, before, Stephen, I want to ask you again, as we get into the bio type stuff, talk to the crowd a little bit more about digital in terms of where you think we're at. Are we successful enough here? What are the lessons we can then apply to some of the next ones? Because I think we're going to have a lot of discussion on bio, but as we've talked about,
right?
Yeah, there's food, there's light industrial, there's you name it, specialty chemical. Chicago is fortunate to have incredible industries across the spectrum in these verticals where we can bring folks together. But there's something about digital that worked, and there's something about bio and healthcare that's working. So give us your perspective on that.
Great. And I mean, that is actually one of the things that's very exciting about Chicago and very exciting about Chicago right now is that there's huge opportunities that are in different stages of development and are reshaping the economy and the ecosystem of Chicago. So, are we successful in digital? Not yet, but we're doing pretty well. And a lot of the pieces that have come together over the last, they've been building over the last 10 years, but have really come together over the last 5 years, I think now make Chicago a place where there's really no reason why someone who wants to build a digital technology company in Chicago can't start it, can't find the funding they want, can't find the mentoring, can't find the partners, can't find the talent. It's all here and it's all accessible now, which is, I think, something over the last 5 years that has really sort of come together and allowed the ecosystem here to flourish. Chicago broke into the top 10 of the global, if you look at cities globally and which ones are the best to build technology companies, we broke into the top 10 towards the end of last year. Hopefully that'll keep going up. So things are going very well. I think there's probably a dozen tech companies that most people here probably haven't heard of, but that within the next 3 years will probably either have billion-dollar exits or go public or be acquired, and that will become household names and will continue to help define Chicago. Hopefully some of those might be a little early, but some of those over the next 5 years will be companies that came out of here. So I think we're doing well. Healthcare, as you said, we have a very different ecosystem. We have, look at assets, that are sort of the envy of the country. We've got world-leading pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, research universities, teaching hospitals, insurance companies, things like Walgreens and Cardinal, and a very dynamic but somewhat more nascent early-stage innovation ecosystem that people here are helping to put together. So huge opportunity there to build on what Chicago already has. Lots of exciting developments in clean energy as well. And it goes on from there.
Yeah. David, why don't you pick up on that a little bit? Some of the themes of healthcare, life sciences, bio, why that's the next one, what's exciting about it from your perspective. What are the pieces that need to come together for this to be successful? Because we talked about this as well. We could easily blow this, right? It's happened before with different areas by things going wrong. So how do we make this successful from your perspective?
Well, I think we're putting the pieces together now that did not exist 10 years ago in this space. Just to give everyone a little history, all of us that are involved with trying to build out the life sciences ecosystem have felt that the Chicagoland area should be at the same level as the Bay Area, as San Diego, as Boston. We have all of the pieces, and yet we have not succeeded as they have in the rapid development of life sciences startups. And part of it I've always felt, and I don't want to offend anybody here, is that we have, quote, too many medical schools. So we had to spend 20 years just getting the big medical schools to play nice. And he's a product of them starting to play nice, and part of the reason is because the Searle Foundation said, you guys don't play nice, we're not giving you any more money. So it's been a very important process of University of Chicago, Northwestern, UIC, Rush, Loyola, the other schools trying to work together collaboratively to build this, and I think that's really important. The other thing that happened is that we had no private sector interest in building out laboratories and offices to support life sciences startups like you have in a place like the Bay Area or San Diego or Seattle. So we had to find out a way of engaging primarily the state of Illinois in investing in building out these incubators and tech parks. And so we started in 1982. Governor Thompson made the first commitment to the University of Illinois to build out the Chicago Technology Park incubator, which was done because Amgen, Jim Stuckel, who was the chancellor at the UIC, went to Governor Thompson and said, hey, did you know we just lost this company called Amgen to California? And he said, what's that? So he said, well, they're the first biotech company. Started in Illinois, and they went to Thousand Oaks, California, because they got the investors out there, and there was no help here. And that led to then building the research center there. That then took another 10 years to fill up, but now Kapila is trying to figure out how to renovate it. Now it's 30 years old. But it really was the first one, and it existed all alone. That's where his company got started. There was no place. You've got to have, for real biotech, you've got to have real wet labs. You all know what wet labs are, right? Sinks, fume hoods, safety equipment. You can't be doing this stuff in your backyard or in an open space like 1871. You've got to have real investment, which is like $400 to $1,000 a square foot to build out those labs instead of $150 a square foot. So no private investor in Illinois wanted to take a chance on this stuff. We then followed after her in 2001. Illinois Institute of Technology made the decision to take a bunch of old lab buildings on the south end of our campus, right across the street from the projects, and in the anticipation those projects were going away, to transform it into University Technology Park at IIT, designed to be the next stage of companies that grew out of the Chicago Technology Park, because they were kind of stuck. And you needed a place, instead of 400 square feet, people needed 1,000 or 1,500 square feet for the next place. And that's where we saw ourselves fitting in.
That was our problem. We wanted to find space in the city, and they always promised that you're going to be able to graduate and move into this. They always pointed to a field across from where we were at.
Right, and they couldn't do it because
this is where you're going to go.
Part of it was
the field is still there.
And part of it was because they didn't have, I think, is it was more constrained than we were because they're a public entity.
Right.
Whereas we were able to bring in a private investor, private developer who built out our technology business center for growth companies. So Chromatin is a great example. I know Chromatin is a great example of one of the most important biotech companies, plant biotech companies in the world, founded right here out of University of Chicago Technology, that was incubated in the Chicago Technology Park. And then when they got their big money, their Series A round, they moved into our park, and they were there from 2007 to 2011. And then when they got their real big money, they moved downtown, and we saved them from moving to California because their first investor wanted to move them to California, and the chief technologist said, the inventor said, no, we're going to stay right here. It's a great story. They're also at the University of Illinois Technology Park in Urbana. Now they're in 4 states, they have 120 employees, and amazing story. But so anyway, just to finish off this, the next thing that happened was in 2004, about the same time we started to get traction in our park, the Illinois Science and Technology Park came to be when they sold off the old Searle facilities, Searle Pharmacia Pfizer facility. Pfizer ended up selling the Skokie facility, which became the Illinois Science and Technology Park, for larger companies. So in a period there, after this very slow start, now in 2013, we've got a real family of options for life science companies, and actually all hard tech companies, because my park is now not only life science, but I've got materials companies in there, metallurgy, clean tech companies that need hard space, which is all more expensive. And thank goodness that the state of Illinois stood by us and funded these, put money into all of these ventures. They've just did the gun for you.
Yeah, so can I expand on that real quick?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk, if you can, talk about the state of Illinois' impact, but also just University of Illinois in the context, not just of bio, but of what's going on there that's so impressive when you think about the history of technologies. I mean, we have in the wall in there the Stephen Chen, U of I, guy who goes to YouTube, leaves town, and any U of I person I know, they're haunted. They can list them
Netscape.
all. Yeah. Mark
Netscape.
Andreessen.
The
They have
internet,
10 of them,
right.
as you know. So if you could talk about Illinois and everything going on there, and then also the government element.
Sure. So starting with that piece first, I think a lot of that history led to the creation of what everybody knows very well down in Urbana is our research park about 12 years ago, which was really designed to find a way to capture people in Urbana-Champaign to commercialize technologies. And so the university just basically dedicated a space to a growing, thriving research park that then housed an incubator there for the companies spitting out of the University of Illinois. And today, I think the last economic impact was it contributes about $175 million a year to the local economy. So that's a pretty impressive contribution that stemmed from a lot of these legacy issues. But then to get back to the role that the government's playing to bridge that gap and to tie it back to what David was saying, as over time they were growing bigger and bigger spaces. So starting with Chicago Techpark, which had small, to IIT, which had a little bit bigger space, to the Searle facility that has even bigger space, we're now engaging the state of Illinois to go backwards a little bit and start earlier at the proof of concept level. And we've just received some funding from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity to create that shared biotech incubation space. And a lot of this is what we're calling more proof of concept, because as this larger ecosystem has been built out and we've seen some successes now start to generate later and later down the pipeline, we're realizing with these complex R&D projects, with the life sciences in particular, the therapeutics, the devices that we've been talking about, there's still a long development cycle. And at those earliest stages when there's research developed and there's an inkling of some intellectual property that's coming out of it, there's still a long ways to go before you can even start a company. And so this notion of proof of concept is becoming a lot more, you're hearing this term a lot more, to figure out how do we start building, bridging together these stages earlier on in the process. So our facility is really designed to take a step back, create smaller space, which is actually going to be shared wet lab space. They've done this around the country in a couple areas that we've talked about in San Francisco, San Diego, but I think it's going to be a real culture shift for the folks coming out of the university and research institutions here to figure out how am I going to share lab space that's economical, because I'm not ready to really go out and rent my own big lab, but do my proof of concept work, validate it, test the feasibility, do a little bit of initial market research, and most importantly, figure out if it's going to fail early and start over again. Too often we let a lot of these companies get out and the structure forces them to form a company, go raise money, and then figure out if it works. So we're leveraging the state dollars, our university assets, and basically our powerhouse of intellectual property at the University of Illinois to figure out if we can create more viable technologies early on, test the market feasibility, and then accelerate them to venture readiness, and then spin them out into the more traditional incubation space. So I think bridging the university and the state and the rest of the assets that are coming out of the city is really coming together nicely.
I need to add one thing, by the way, because I forgot it and I would be remiss in saying it. Our ultimate goal, I think, would be, from a city perspective, would be that all of this cycle of process leads to standalone firms located in the Illinois Medical District, right, which is new leadership under Warren Ribley, and the state's really interested in re-engaging that, because that was the original concept, that all these little incubators would feed to allow, because they've got a lot of space out there on the west side that would create big-time jobs.
Totally agree. And so let's talk about you, David. You mentioned something about John and the quote, playing nice, which I think is critical here. Can you give your perspective, John, on how you think all this can work well by playing nice? So think about it. Multiple universities, multiple situations, economics at play, egos at play, incubators, some for-profit, some non-for-profit, politicians, entrepreneurs. It's a mixed brew that could be incredible or could be really scary. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's going to be incredible. I don't think it's going to be scary. And here's why. I think there's an environmental shift. I think if you look at the last 10 years, the government through the NIH has put a lot of funding into our universities. And we have some of the most prolific researchers in the world. I mean, the number of patents that come out of our universities is formidable. And so now recognizing that the economy has shifted, government is going to spend less money on early stage basic research. You see then a pressure on tech transfer and faculty to look outward and try to begin to commercialize their technologies or have them ready to be picked up by the private sector. So paint a picture. Moving through the laboratories at the universities, you can look at and see the laboratory build-outs, infrastructures, the pedigree of the faculty, and the quality of the technology coming forward. It's never been higher. And that's it's a super highway that leads in to the university, but when it exits the university, it hits a dirt road. So what I think is happening right now is we're seeing organizations, industry, whether it's VCs, angels, SIM, incubators, iBioPropel, all forming to help pave the next section of the road so that these technologies are ready to be taken onto the institutional next step, whether it's institutional VCs or acquisition or corporate partnerships. So that's kind of the backdrop that's forming right now. So you have to recognize that we're still in the building phases of this. But what's motivating people to play nice at the university level is really economics. I mean, they have to rely on the outside community to commercialize these technologies because it's also in their interest because these are taxpayer dollars that have gone in. They're leveraging the taxpayer dollars, and they have the upside potential that if these technologies hit, it generates a return on investment to go on and do more research. It's a lot like the pharmaceutical engine and business model in that sense as well, because you got to have this strong pipeline. So I think what helps people to continue to play nice is the economic environment that's caused, and that's why you see this alignment happening right now. But I think you got to look at the back end as well. So large companies, insurers, pharmaceutical companies, device manufacturers are also equally incented because they've got a problem as well at the back end, and that is they've got products that are becoming obsolete or they're going off patent. And in the age of healthcare reform, to have strong margins of products that you can price at a high rate to the marketplace, it's got to have huge differentiable advantages. And those products are sitting at the university. They're not, in phase 3 ready to be acquired because those assets have been snapped up and acquired. So I think that's what keeps the institutions working together. The last piece I'll mention is that at the policymaker level, the state of Illinois, city of Chicago are very much aligned in terms of attracting and developing these types of business. That's a big shift going back to when we first started that I've seen develop over time. And their incentive to also be involved in this because they see job growth, job creation. What's happened in 1871 is a great story as to what can happen in these other sectors. 1871 moves in. You got Motorola coming into the market. You got Google building down the street. You got Groupon. You got returning entrepreneurs. The same thing is brewing on the hard sciences side. And I think you've got all these players that it's fear and greed. That's what's really motivating. It's not because everybody just wants to play nice. They need to play nice, and we have to take advantage of it. And that's why I think it's going to be a happy picture rather than a gruesome brew.
Well, good answer. I want to give you
one other example.
One example, and I want you to do the final one to get some more airtime for you here. If you had your magic wand, and then we're going to open it up to the audience here, what is the one thing we need across all of these spaces? So digital, biotech, clean tech, whatever, in your mind that we currently don't have. So go ahead and finish that one, but that magic wand question for you, Steve.
The magic wand, if I had a magic wand, that'd be great. I'm going to answer two.
Yeah.
So first, I just want to give another example on what John was talking about and what you asked for with collaboration with universities. So for those of you who haven't spent a ton of time at 1871, there's a hallway down there that has University of Illinois, the Illinois Institute of Technology, Northwestern University, and the University of Chicago, all with offices that they're renting right in a row. And you didn't used to see that in a lot of places with those four universities all coming together right next to each other, collaborating in a space like this to drive entrepreneurship and economic development. And from a digital point of view, what's particularly exciting about that is if you look at those four universities, they each have literally world-leading programs in a key area of focus for digital entrepreneurs. So IIT has one of the world's best design schools. University of Illinois, one of the world's best engineering schools, and Northwestern University of Chicago have two of the world's best business schools. And those are the three ingredients of what a digital startup is. So that's been a really exciting and a very important partnership between 1871 and those universities, and one of the keys of success of this space. So to answer your magic wand question, one of the greatest things about Chicago and one of the greatest sort of untapped opportunities is that Chicago has the most diverse economy of any big city in the country. And it has world-leading, as you talked about a little bit before, world-leading pharmaceutical and medical companies. But if you look at financial services, if you look at manufacturing, if you look at consumer packaged goods, energy, across the board, we have some of the world's largest, highest functioning, best performing companies across all these sectors. The opportunity there, and if I could wave the magic wand, it would be that startups and early stage entrepreneurs across a range of industries, from digital to healthcare to energy to food service to you name it, have a pipeline and an entree into those companies who can act as mentors, who can act as investors, and most importantly, ultimately can act as pilot customers and eventually customers. Because if you go on the other side of that wall and you ask any of the entrepreneurs here what they would most like to have, it's a pilot customer who's going to work with them, help them iterate their product, help them go to market, help them figure out exactly what their customers need so that they can turn their vision and their idea into a reality. So if I could wave the wand, that's what I would do.
The wand is a good thing, so I'm going to wave the wand now to the audience, if that's okay, and continue this dialogue, but get the questions from all of you on areas that you want. So start it off. Anyone have any questions for the panel here?
I'll zigzag around if anybody has their hand up.
Alex, come on, ask a clean energy question.
Oh,
All right, go ahead.
Thanks. This is a question for David Baker. At one point, IIT had a part called the Research Institute, ITRI, and I thought that was kind of a tech innovator or an incubator. As far as I knew, this is back in the 60s. I'm just trying to find out, did anything grow out of that? Is it still going? Was it a tech incubator? And can it be still used?
Well, ITRI actually became ITRI in 1962. They adopted the name from the Armour Research Foundation. And they were an incubator of great ideas, mainly stuff that was licensed. And in fact, one of our most infamous moments was when a faculty member there invented the modern use of magnetic tape and magnetic recording in the 40s through the 60s. He held almost all the patents. And ITRI made a mistake, and it all ended up with Sony. And so we went on and did other things. So our University Technology Park is a direct beneficiary of ITRI because our buildings are the old ITRI research buildings at 35th and State, and they were by the time I got them, they had been abandoned by ITRI, and the university sold off the assets of 90% of ITRI to the employees that created a for-profit company that moved to the East Coast. Completely different Bellway Bandit they became. But we kept the life sciences division, that is the anchor tenant now for our tech park. They got about 100 scientists and staff located in the tech park. So our park now that was there in those old ITRI buildings built in the 40s now has 26 companies and 350 employees at 30 in creating new ideas. And ITRI serves them by providing their analytical equipment support and actually testing some of the ideas. But it's as an incubator, I mean, other than the research that they do in life sciences, it's now all gone to the East Coast.
I would like you to explore what you were talking about with identifying early stage companies and their viability before you let them out on their own. It seems to be very common that these large institutions have these phenomenal ideas or phenomenal technologies or patent, and then the next step is you're on your own and you're pitching to VCs or angels every night of the week for the next 2 years and see what, that's the general, it seems to like, are you going through a checklist or some kind of, especially with bio, how do you identify or what are your key things that you're looking for as you go forward to assist the decision making of whether it spins out or not?
Sure. So to be fair to some, can you hear me? Okay.
So to be fair to some of those who are spinning out, unfortunately, some of the structure of how we're set up forces them to do that. So the universities find or have a technology, they want to patent it, so they secure the patent, and then they have to license it to somebody. And in order for it to be licensed, typically the inventor has to form a company, license it, in order to just begin working on it, right? And so, and a lot of the funding mechanisms require that funding goes into a company and not into a university. So, unfortunately, the structure sort of forces that. But what we're trying to do, and particularly on UIC's campus, with some funding that's being reinvested through our commercialization assets, is identify the pipeline early on. after the patenting, as the invention disclosures come to fruition and as the patenting decisions are getting made, what UIC has done over the last 2 to 3 years is develop their proof of concept fund, invest money in promising projects. And the way they've very effectively set up the triage process is have a strict application process, make sure that there's commercial potential and that the inventors and the researchers are thinking about commercial potential, but then the decisions are made by outside investors. We have a panel of venture capitalists and early stage investors saying, yeah, this is promising. If it came across our desk in a couple years, maybe we'd invest in it. So they're helping with that process. The other thing that we are starting to do, and we piloted this out last semester, and we're going to continue going forward through Enterprise Work Chicago, is putting together teams, diverse teams of MBA students, PhD students, and most importantly, postdocs who are very well versed in the science and the technology, but are looking for alternative career paths and need some guidance on how to really develop a skill set that will be acceptable in the private sector. So we're building these teams around these proof of concept projects that have been decided by venture capitalists, and putting them through we will be starting to put them through sort of an accelerator where we have experts come in and talk to them about what are the key things that they need to be thinking about? What are the key questions you need to ask early on in the process so that they can start to develop their roadmap, get through a proof of concept phase, make a decision. Is this going anywhere? Is there some viability here? Then building a startup. So I think we're engaging the Chicago Innovation Mentors program very heavily to get that outside input and then translate that outside input into actionable road mapping development plans so that we can really know. Because otherwise, you're right, a lot of times we don't know. We have a lot of patents and we're just not sure what to do with it.
Yep. You're flying blind and you're making these
the other
investments.
thing that's happening that's very important here is a partnership that has been created around iBio. That iBio, we used iBio, and all of us leveraged the International Biotechnology Convention to build a true partnership and engagement between Big Pharma on the North Shore and the institutions. And now all of them are looking at an open source process to create new products, and they all have a long list. So they're now forming partnerships with the universities to go in and start to talk about what they really need and then try to find investigators and test the stuff early on. This is a relatively new thing for them, and I was in a meeting of the Mayor's Task Force is focused on bio, and there's a guy from one of the big pharma companies, and he says, you guys don't know how to work with this at all. I work so easily with UCLA and all these other schools. He said, wait a minute, you're right here on the North Shore. How come we can't figure this out? So that's starting to happen. I think it's a very important component of this, that can complement, because those guys are the ones that know what they need, what's available. They've got great scientists that can partner. Now, it's scary because they always worry about who gets the IP and who gets screwed up and who gets ripped off. And so we're trying to come up, we're really working in the community and iBio's working with us, and John's working, and Steve's working on how do we create a better collaboration with Big Pharma, because we got these guys right here in the neighborhood.
I think what we're describing here is this pipeline flow at the very early stage, before it leaves the university. So Kapila, proof of concept fund, and then exposing these technologies and these individuals, these faculty members, these students with technologies that they want to commercialize before they license that patent and before the university invests in the patent further. Exposure to the market. There's no replacement for having someone from the outside take a look and say, this would have value. Or, more often than not, it might be your idea may not have value down this path, but it has tremendous value going down this path. And so the whole idea of the mentoring process is we're putting 5 expert mentors. Somebody comes out of Hospira, having gotten, 20 NDAs approved as part of the mentoring team. Someone who's raised, $100 million of venture capital, an angel that sits around the table with this innovator. And then you've got people with market research experience, people with IP experience. So you're surrounding these individuals earlier in the process to vet the technology, even in support of the technology transfer office that kind of is working on the inside. So exposure to the market early on, and then building this pipeline. Part of what David was talking about is the genesis behind what we're working on right now to try to build a life sciences and healthcare innovation center here downtown Chicago. Because what I think Chicago has is all these assets, great institutions, both at the large corporate level and at the research level. The challenge is that we're very spread out, and we're spread across a large geographic area. So we have trouble with density. So we have to force density, and the way we can force density at the early stage of development, once it leaves Kapila's shop, is to have a place where people can aggregate, modeled on 1871. So I've been a part of a project working with Jeff Aronin, Steve Collins, and other entrepreneurs to try to bring this type of space where you're bringing people together, mentors, regulatory experts, patent attorneys, universities on the front end, pharma companies, healthcare companies on the back end. You're putting them together and exposing these people to information early in the process helps to focus that entrepreneur so that when they go out on the road to try to raise capital, they know what they're asking for. They have a viable plan. They have a well-built patent portfolio because they've been tested in this process. So what you see forming right now is this pipeline leveraging the different pieces of the ecosystem. We have great assets on the landscape already. One missing piece we feel is having this aggregator of people in a high traffic area downtown here in the city, and that's what we aim to do here in the next couple of months, is bring an 1871 to the biosciences and healthcare arena to help amplify and exchange with IIT, with ISTP, with what's going on at Enterprise Works Chicago as well, to try to increase the vibrancy and the viability of these companies, because the appetite for starting a business has never been higher, and I would say, having been around it for a long time, it's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur in Chicago than it is today. But accessing these resources is being made easier if you can put them into one place. So I always kind of liken the notion of this space that we're trying to put together that would interact very closely with our institutions is the sense that we've got this burgeoning community of mentors and experts, service providers, technology providers, institutions, and it's a congregation, but there's no physical church to practice in. And so that's what we're trying to do with this space. And I think that as you put it all together, that's a missing piece of the puzzle that I think is, is this road that we're trying to build out beyond the superhighway that is described within the universities.
Let me take a chance. I'm sorry, you got a question. Go ahead, it's your turn for questions.
Hi. I'd be interested to hear the panel comment on two things, and perhaps they're related. It's not lost. I thought it was interesting the comment about the film schools, Columbia and DePaul, and you might add Tribeca, Flashpoint Media to that. The role of social science on one hand, and the role of the neighborhoods on the other. Chicago is marked by a swath of urban poverty from north to south, and it's not lost on me that probably the most substantial startup to come out of Chicago in the last decade was started not by a doctor or an MBA, but by a guy out of Harris, right? Groupon, I think, came out of the founder was studying at Harris when he came up with the idea. And Chicago has some great social science institutions. So I guess a two-part question for the panelists. What do you see as the role of social entrepreneurship? Not necessarily the government, but really what Bill Drayton of Ashaka would call the citizen sector, and how that plays out in the neighborhoods, and how the tech park's physical location, do they all need to be downtown, or will we see innovation and value being added by thinking about Chicago in a more broader sense geographically?
Who wants to take that?
Well, of course, we're located in the heart of Bronzeville University Technology Park, and we're unabashed about being a place that aggregates good quality jobs, both for neighborhood residents and for other people, and for leveraging the resources of IIT to benefit people that want to get into technology-based businesses or social entrepreneurial businesses to support the community. So beyond, and we actually have 3 or 4 of those companies that are in the tech park, African American owned entrepreneurial companies. Some are are IP-based, some are service-based, but they're all focused in technology. So that's immediately. But then we also have a number of programs designed that we've both funded by the SBA and funded by private foundations, where our Community Affairs Division, our NAP Entrepreneurial Center, which is represented here today, and the people in the Techpark are actually trying to help local companies because we're there. And we have student-based initiatives where our business school students actually provide business development support to those startups, which are not located in the, there have been several attempts to create incubators based on what you're talking about that have not succeeded yet, but they've tried to do it. So we're kind of an anchor there where we're leveraging the resources of our students and faculty to benefit these companies to try to build a new economy in a really devastated part of the city. I mean, when we started University Technology Park, across the street was one of the 10 poorest census tracts in the United States, represented by Stateway Gardens. Now, of course, Stateway Gardens had to go away before we could imagine attracting tech companies to that neighborhood. But that mixed income residential community includes many CHA residents living there, which are part of this process. So we're very conscious about that responsibility, and we've worked with a number of organizations like the Urban Innovation Center, that's run by the Bronzeville Development Commission. They were actually, I hosted them in my incubator for a year to try to get them started, and now we're hosting them in our tower, and they're working focused specifically on tech stuff. One last little point about the social sciences, our university just created a new college called the College of Human Sciences that brought together all our social sciences and humanities programs and psychology to focus on this incredible new niche, which is called social media and social networking. It's such a huge business opportunity, and we're going to combine that with the big data focus of our computer science department to see how we can support companies and actually create companies in this whole new huge space that's just been created in the world.
And I would just add that, I mean, you got to look at what 1871 has done. Look at what Steve and his team have created. It's created the air cover to do a lot of other things in different sectors, different parts of the city, diversity, all these things. I think it opens up a door because it shines a light on what entrepreneurship means. But entrepreneurship can be applied in, whether it's a geography or a local or national geography. It can be in different sectors. But what 1871 has done is open the eyes of the city and the region around a transformative event that is recognizing a cultural shift toward entrepreneurship and a restart of the economy that will take many years to develop. But I think what 1871 has put the spotlight on is challenging people in different geographies, and I think it then suggests it's a multitude of these types of catalytic aggregators of people around these different features, but there can be crossover too. I mean, we talk about the convergence of healthcare and IT. So, 1871 and its strength in digital IT, there's going to be things that happen that cross over into healthcare with the changes in healthcare legislation and what we can do with big data and so on and so forth. And so that convergence of ideas, this mixing pot that Chicago has always been, I think will create new things and new models that were never envisioned before. But I go back to a lot of it's because of what 1871 has been able to spotlight, again, after many years of getting to where we are on the backs of giants to get to where we are. But it's where it is now that I think you got to look at where will we be 5, 10, 15 years out, and the possibilities I think are enormous.
Yeah, let me just add one thought on that, just thematic, before we get to the next question. So the whole notion of 1871, you get it, it's pretty straightforward. Fire occurred, and then all the entrepreneurial energy that occurred right after, Cyrus McCormick, the Reaper, all these different things that related to ag, and you can go on, and then Walgreens and Motorola starting in 1929 with $223 in its first year revenues on a battery eliminator, motor plus Vitrola equals Motorola. This all happened on Harrison Street. You can go on and on and on. Aon, started by Pat Ryan, selling insurance to used car dealers. It's a city of entrepreneurs. And so a lot of these folks get entrepreneurialism, and so they want to help in this case, 1871, a digital entrepreneur, which could be a Park Ridge High School, New Church kid that goes to Illinois that then becomes, an ex-computer science person down here. But extend that thinking of entrepreneurialism across the city. There is no reason why we couldn't do this in various communities. So working with the Urban League of Chicago to do it with the African American community on specific industries that could work there, or with the Mexican American community as well in Chicago, or with little niches here and there. It's very doable. It's a very Chicago theme if you think about it, because a lot of these people are spending their time doing this altruistically. You mentioned Jeff Aroning. This guy's been an incredibly successful entrepreneur, doing it again and again, now spending a lot of time doing this on the side while he's running his own business. This can be done also in the communities, and then you're going to see things sprouting up with very niche specific applications in communities in Chicago, but it's not going to happen overnight. But that to me is kind of 1871 3.0, where we aspire to, where you have small businesses growing up, mom and pops doing it, but also aspirationally building off the overall community and everything that's moving forward. At least that's kind of how I see it. I think it would be great for the city.
It's happening already.
Yeah.
Okay, the question's coming from this side. I think 1871 is great. However, the frame it is my question. Only 10% of entrepreneurs succeed within 5 years. So the questions are going to be based on reality stuff, on IT-based entrepreneurs. And we've gone, started off with STEM. First and 3.5. How do you get universities and facilities to work together with IT? How do they share it? Do they share licensing? I have a question. I'm not a question in your UIC.
Oh, no, they're not.
I'm going to get a better idea from the screen. So,
Sure.
how do you work it with employees?
Well, let me just describe the process. So, faculty member gets the idea. They're employed by the university. They've developed a technology. They've had a conversation with the technology transfer office. They've filed a patent around their technology, and that may be the stepping stone for them to form a business and then find a partner, license the technology into that company. That process won't change. So these ideas and inventions are owned by the universities, and then they've created property, intellectual property in this case, that is a bundle that needs to be acquired by a private company. In the case of where it sits today, a lot of these technologies are not developed enough where a pharma company can go in and decide to take the risk and take it forward. More work needs to be done to actually put it into a licensable or investable state, and there's a gap. And so the consortium doesn't change the model in terms of how these assets are created and how they're licensed and how companies are formed. What the consortium does is harness the community, in this case mentors or experts who've done it before, who've developed and marketed products like these and know what it takes to get there. And that's where the universities are collaborating, leveraging this common resource. But what I have found through this process is that under the auspices of team mentoring, we're doing a good job one by one with each of these ventures and each of these entrepreneurs. But the amazing thing that's happened in the meantime on the side has been the formation of this community and all these dots getting connected. So when SIM started, it was Northwestern, it was University of Chicago, and it was UIC. Then we added Urbana. Then we added Argonne. Then we added Rehab Institute of Chicago. Northern Illinois just signed up this week. I'm thrilled about that. Purdue is coming to our next meeting. So you have a lot of reasons now why people are coming together and new dots are getting connected, and now you're seeing that type of collaboration. So I don't see the model changing in terms of, the IP issue getting messy. The IP's already been formed and licensed before, the collaboration begins. I hope that helps.
Okay, the second part is your timeline. Is it realistically get to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, FDA, really the proof of concept? If people really understand how many years it is, in reality it's not like I did yesterday. We're talking 10, 15,
Well, I think you got to break it down. So I think you got to look at, we're in a new world, and I think it's a new world no matter whether you're here in Chicago or you're in La Jolla or you're in the Bay Area or you're in Cambridge. It's a new world, and the way you fund a biosciences company or a healthcare tech company is vastly different from the way it used to be, which was more of a marathon. You put in $100 million and we're going to develop 4 or 5 products, and it's going to be 10 years to get to the market, but we're going to do it all ourselves. It's not the way you do it anymore. So you got to break it down into investable increments. So today, an entrepreneur needs to be thinking about the relay race. I'm designing this to pass the baton to the next buyer or acquirer or investor. And so if you break it down into increments, you're able to attract stage-specific investors or partners that can help you fund your investment up to that point, that understand the entry point and the exit point. And I don't purport to make it sound easy. I've rode the highs and lows of long journeys to get to, in my case, great joys but great sorrows in that process. And I think that spotlighting the nature of the biosciences business and how it's different, we have that window of time now to be able to talk to people beyond people that understand it. So I'm in conversations now because of what's happening in digital tech and the spotlight there. I was always kind of a strange guy on our block where nobody, I was an entrepreneur in biosciences and nobody really understood that. Today, people are asking about, hey, I heard you're an entrepreneur, I know you're in biosciences, and they know a lot more about the model. And that's because there's a lot bigger spotlight around entrepreneurship first, and now people are starting to ask the question of, well, what does it mean to be doing biosciences? And so I think it's going to take time. That's the other issue. So one is practical. How you fund these businesses, it's a relay race. It's not a marathon anymore. And Chicago has a chance to design new business and financing models today that set the stage for us being a leader in the next 30-year run in biosciences after we just came off the last 30-year run where we saw the coast be very successful. We don't have to break the old models. We can invent new models, but I think it's going to be important to tell the story to the layperson, the guy down the block, as to how you do it to get a fan base and get support. But, I'll just take the example of the fact that this biosciences and healthcare center is getting the backing of Mayor Emanuel, Governor Quinn, J.B. Pritzker, Michael Sachs. People that are not typically thinking about biosciences are now interested in it and are getting behind it. That is a huge breakthrough, in my opinion.
Can I also, just to build on what you said, what you described as a process is related to therapeutics. Most of what we're talking about when we say bioscience or healthcare innovation is partly therapeutics. It's also medical device and diagnostics, which have a shorter time frame. It's healthcare IT, which can have a shorter time frame. And what's, I think, really exciting and where Chicago has a really interesting opportunity based on the assets and the skills and the companies that are here is the integration, as the sort of world of life sciences moves and data and predictive analytics becomes a more important component of medical devices and diagnostics and analyses of diagnostic testing. There's a lot of development that's going to occur, and if we do it right and we take advantage of the assets and the people and the resources that we have in Chicago, we can really be positioned one step ahead of a lot of other parts of the country in that area.
Last question, because we got one more for the crowd here, so save your question up. But go ahead.
That's right.
As did Abbott.
So my summary of all of this is a story of one of our companies that is a medical device company called ACT. And they came out of nowhere. There was an emergency room doc at Christ Hospital in Oak Lawn and came up with an idea for the rapid cooling of bodies of humans that have suffered from stroke or heart failure or whatever. They realized this is a great technology, and the first approaches were clumsy things like thermal blankets or whatever, or catheters. So these guys showed up on my doorstep and became one of our early tenants, and we introduced them to iBioPropel. They won the iBioPropel contest. They got a great visibility. They got support from the community, and in 1 year, they just started their second year in our park. They've raised $1 million. They got their EU version of the FDA approvals. They're selling to hospitals in Europe already, and they're working on their FDA 510. And this is going to be a very successful company coming out of Chicago, moving very fast in medical device. That is going to be a real success and actually save lives and reduce the terrible damage that comes from serious strokes. And it's a great example of the whole community collaborating to support one of these little companies that really kind of came out of nowhere.
They came through the SIM mentoring process.
The
State of Illinois has it's called the IIVF, Illinois Invest Venture Fund. They were the recipient of an equity investment directly from the state of Illinois. So there's a story of, and there are others that have that same story.
And angel investors, too, got behind them and private investors. So this is really a great little mini success story. I mean, it's not going to be a vastly, they'll sell themselves off to somebody pretty soon. But it's really a great example of how you do this and how everybody collaborates. We basically provided the space and the initial connections, and the community took it the rest of the way.
I think that's a key point, though, is I think people got caught up in the Groupon thing, and it's, at the end of the day, a great story for Chicago, even though it's not maybe as big as Facebook. That's fine. The best wins that are going to come out of Chicago are going to be these small ones that slowly become singles, doubles, triples, and like Steve said, if you have 10 companies coming through, a couple of them are trade sales, like a Field Glass getting invested in by Madison Dearborn or some of these other healthcare companies. These all start to add up. You get 100 jobs, 200 jobs, 1,000 jobs. They become the next big thing. So I think that's a big message here is we've got to have a mentality of not completely swinging for grand slams all the time. It's great if you have a few. Those are going to be awesome. But singles, doubles, triples are fantastic across these verticals because they all add up over time in terms of economic development. So we have time for one last question. Anyone from the audience? Okay.
We didn't talk about clean tech at all. So. Alex is wondering how come
It's one of the problems in this area is that we're not able to keep businesses past the incubator stage in the Chicago metropolitan area, say the second stage of the relay or the third stage of the relay. They usually go out of town or out of country.
Yeah, well, that was one of the problems, right? When Dave talked about it, when the CEC was formed, the idea was we don't want the companies that are started here by IIT or U of I grads on our tax dollars to then go to the coast, funded by VCs who use our pension dollars. Because that's what happens. And then they create economic development, and we wonder, wow, why are we losing jobs? Why is the state of Illinois suffering? That's not a good thing. So that's where a lot of these organizations have been started and have been formatted around, is trying to make sure this incredible talent we have coming out of our school systems in the state of Illinois, both public and private, stay here, get funded by angels and venture firms, and mentored correctly with the big companies working with them on their platforms to help them stick around. We're not going to get it right all the time. There's going to be companies always going to the sun of Silicon Valley. That's fine. They're going to go to Boston, Austin, but let's keep some here. And oh, by the way, maybe we can attract some here too, because more often than not, people have a husband or wife who are from here, Racine, Wisconsin, Cicero, you name it. They want to return here because it's a great community. So that's the next phase, drawing a lot of these people back to Chicago because it's such a great city and such a great state. And I think you're going to start to see more and more of that.
And that's more of an ecosystem issue too, is, to attract returning entrepreneurs and capital to the space, and to have people, it's a critical mass issue. So, what we see happening then with returning entrepreneurs is the building of this critical mass so that they can build phase 1, build phase 2, build phase 3 in comfort because the recirculation process is there in place. Once they move on and exit in their own career, they can go back and restart right here in Chicago. And the more you can kind of get that repeater process going, the more you have a very solid fabric and foundation upon which you have long-term success that you see happening in other geographies. So, I mean, Chicago's got more assets in terms of where it's located here in this country to house and support those late-stage businesses as well. I mean, people want to be here. But I think what's been lacking in the past is the idea that the critical mass isn't here and the risk-taking associated with that critical mass that supports that risk-taking process has been lacking, but that's changed.
All right, last question, Alex. Fire away, man.
Well, you actually kind of addressed a little bit with respect to the 3.0 with talent retention, the human capital side of it. I guess looking forward 5 to 7 years from now, how do you see the incubators going beyond just what you're saying, but also kind of building that national reputation as Chicago as being a great place to be? So the case in context, when I was down in Houston being a mentor in residence at a accelerator down there, when I mentioned I was from Chicago, the first question is, what is 1871? How can we build something like that down here in Houston? And what will it take to do that? So I know that people are watching, and then the question is, how do we move it to the next level of saying, oh, instead of being in the Valley or being in Boston, how do we say we have to be in Chicago? And how do the accelerators and incubators play that role?
Yeah, let me take a stab at that. And I agree. The 1871 brand name, and Steve's really one of the key guys responsible for this, was genius. Because it has got national recognition. I'll tell you my
International.
thoughts. Yeah, international. I'll tell you, this is, I really mean this from the heart. This is so critical to Chicago in the future. Is 1871 3.0, or whatever you want to call it, Chicago Innovation 3.0, is the community all coming together with maybe multiple incubators in some common form of working together. So you talked about the IP example earlier. The natural thing is fear and greed. People are all going to want a piece of it. That's part of the capitalistic system. We get it. You know what's going to be a problem in this city if you start seeing either individuals or individual groups trying to take too much claim and trying to do too much and say it's theirs. That's not the way that Chicago does it. There's a long history in the community here going back to 1871 and through entities like the Commercial Club and others that have said, let's figure this out together. Let's work together as universities and as incubators across so we can share resources and do it the Chicago way. And I think that, Alex, is going to be the difference, is when we can figure that out and do it that way. And by the way, other cities don't get it. I say that to my friends in Silicon Valley. They're like, I don't understand it. We're already networked. Well, it's nice that you have Google, Facebook, Stanford, Cal, and it happens. New York, they're like, wait a second, are you kidding me? There's got to be an angle going on. I'm like, no, this is what happens. In Chicago, there's people who have for-profit business motives that they do all the time in their day, who then spend 3 or 4 hours out of their day working as a nonprofit helper at a hospital or at a school or other places. It's in the civic fabric here. It's gone on for 150 years, and we can do it in the next phase. I'd love it if other cities do it because it's great for the national program, but Chicago's done it before, and I think it has a chance to do it again. So I think that's hopefully some of the answer to where we can go in the future. So.
Thank you to our panel. That's a great question and answer to end on.
Nice job, Tim.
Give a applause. This talk has been recorded. We will showcase this. If you become a member, you'll get first access in a couple weeks. If you don't, you'll have to wait maybe a couple months as programs filter through the system. But thank you for joining us. Please get familiar with C2ST if you haven't already, and enjoy your evening.